trauma, we've got a show for you. Get ready to wake up the inner giant. Buckle up. Here we go. Good morning, Giants. Welcome to Wake Up with Giants TV. I'm Ryan Morris, and there I am, nice and big.
Nice and big.
Nice and big. Wasn't ready for that, seeing my face this early
Like,
in the morning.
boom.
I don't know if you guys are ready for that either, but
We got to wake people up somehow.
That's what we do. The shock factor.
Right.
Shock and awe. Well, I'm Ryan Morris, and I'm the co-creator of Wake Up with Giants TV, a tribe of giants and 12 Journeys coaching. And I'm here with Nicholas T. Smith, the author of The Giants and the Smalls. See, I rep it. I got it behind me. I didn't wear the shirt today, but I wore the shirt that Laura gave me. The Muffin Man. There's a whole story behind that one. But Nick wrote this fantastic book. I got to meet Nick about about 5 years ago, something like that, right?
Yeah, pretty close. Yep.
Getting really close. And asked Nick who he was, and he said, "I'm a finance manager for General RV." I said, "No, who are you really?" And he said, "Well, I'm a coach, life coach, and an author." I was like, "Now we're talking." And he showed me this on his computer, and it absolutely changed my life, and it could change your life. So, The Giants and the Smalls, go snag that. Amazon. You can go to giantsandsmalls.com and find that as well. But amazing book. I give it away to everybody that buys an RV from us at the dealership.
He does, man, literally.
And Nick sells a lot of RVs, and so I keep telling people, I'm like, "Hey, have you read? Did he tell you he's an author? Have you read his book?" And they're like, "No, he didn't say anything." I'm like, "Dang it!" So then I get to go through with him, and then have Nick come over and sign the book and talk to him, and usually they have kids or grandkids, and it's pretty rad to see their faces light up and know that their salesperson is also a famous author. It's awesome. So.
Well, but this guy also doesn't talk about his book there, Journey to Riches, of Riches.
I'm shaming you for that.
Yeah, so don't get all over my business over this. So yeah, it's amazing to see these things come about. So we got Hugh on and Lori. Good morning, guys.
Yeah.
This week we're going to be in the UK. I'll be speaking on stage for about 20 minutes there, and then also emceeing the whole event for the full 2 days. And so that'll give us a chance to create even more giants in the world. We were able to donate 200 books to the Children's Hospital out there, and just really striving to create an impact of resilience and overcoming adversity. So big things. Thank you, Lori.
Yeah, and I'll just be running amok.
Yeah,
in the UK.
He gets to have fun. I get to work. So, anything else at the moment?
That's probably it. I think. I don't know. What else do we have going on?
Oh man, we've got if you haven't been to my12journeys.com, you've got to check that out, because that's where we keep all of our main content. So if you're somebody that's struggling with getting out of bed in the morning, you've got a business, you don't know how to keep going, My 12 Journeys is a framework that will help you bounce back. And so the Giants journey is a lifelong journey. And so what we do is strive to arm you with things that will help you to keep going on this journey, to help be your giant. So come join us.
That's super needed. This morning, Nick and I need your encouragement, because we probably sound like 90-year-old smokers. Both got I don't know, something going around our office and the neighborhood and the community. It's spread like wildfire. We got like a head cold mixed with the flu. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird deal. But here we are. We're gonna push through.
Oh, do you want to introduce our guest? I'm excited and ready for this one. This is gonna be awesome.
I'd love to. Yeah, welcome back to Wake Up with Giants TV, everybody. Today we have a truly remarkable guest with us, Glen Williams. Glen is the author of Bridging the Gap, an inside look at communications and relationships after traumatic events, and was part of the award-winning documentary, Is There Something Going On at Home?, With 26 years of experience in law enforcement as a patrol officer, detective, and trainer, Glenn has trained officers nationwide in various critical skills. His program, Bridging the Gap Survival Tactics for Law Enforcement Relationships, aims to reduce the effects of PTSD, divorce, and suicide among officers. And today we're lucky enough to have him on our show to really dive into his expertise and philosophies for life. And Glenn, welcome to the show first off, and we're going to dive into some questions if you're ready.
Oh, absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, man. I've got, I just to get curious when we look at these, there's usually an origin story of something that was occurring in your life. We call this the non-conscious journey. It's the automations. You had a certain way of being,
Yeah.
and that can happen multiple times in life. You had a perception of life, and then there's this awakening moment that says, "Hey, there's probably another way to go here." And can you talk about that? Like what was going on in your world prior to where you're at now?
Well, back in the day, and I hate that saying because it means I'm old,
Yeah, yeah,
but we didn't even know what PTSD was.
yeah.
And looking back, we didn't even know what depression was. We
Mm.
kind of knew the facts, but it was not addressed at the time.
Yeah.
And I was an officer, a detective for 26 years. And during that time, I experienced a bunch of things that just rip people up, like doing CPR on kids and
Mm.
not being able to bring them back. And, on one occasion, I went through a door when shots were being fired, and I had a car charging me to run me down. And while I was pulling the trigger at the driver's forehead,
Holy cow.
and those are all things that just kind of built up. And then I switched to a second department. I worked for the transit police, actually. And I ended up in 40, 50-foot chases and fights through the whole career, and then picking up bodies that were hit by trains and things like that. And those are just things your mind isn't developed to register.
Yeah.
And so there's a huge shock value, and it slowly builds up on you. And there's behaviors that I can say are related to PTSD. I cannot blame them on PTSD because they were my choice.
Yeah.
And I'm huge on self-accountability, and I wasn't very good on that in the old days.
Yeah.
But I ended up divorced, bankrupt, lost everything. And almost lost my family. I lost my marriage, but my kids.
Yeah.
And I made some choices during that time that were horrible, horrible. One of the things with PTSD is thrill seeking. You want that adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
And what's the biggest thrill you can have other than putting the thing that's most important to you at risk and getting away with it? And that's what I did with my relationship. I talk in my classes about this a lot because we seek that rush. And
Right.
that's one reason there's a lot of people that have affairs and things like that. And that's the most important thing to everybody is their family. That's what I'm
Right.
told by 99% of the people throughout the country I've talked to. And yet I put that at risk. And I did have an affair, and I'm not
Yeah.
proud of that. That will never, ever happen again. But I did. And my marriage was messed up. I was bankrupt. I lost everything, and I didn't know what to do at that point. I kind of floundered. I had lost my goal. And back at the time, I hadn't lost my goal because I identified as a cop.
Yeah.
That's who I was. That's how I let the job become my life. Another big mistake. It's
Yeah.
a job. It's not your life. And so I'm throwing some lessons in here also.
Yeah.
As I moved on, I finally came to that realization. I'm a slow learner. I tried it again, marriage, and I ended up divorced again. And I had to finally look at myself and go, okay, what's the common factor here? Well, it's
Mm.
me. And so I got looking at the common factor going, okay, what can I do to shift this? And it was all up to me. So I did. I lived up in my cabin by myself for 3 years up east of Heber,
Yeah.
in the mountains. And I drove 57 miles to work every day, and that gave me a lot of time to think.
Yeah.
And then being up there in nature, and nature is a huge healing force for me. And I
Yeah.
think for anybody, if you want to go for a walk in the woods, I have moose in my driveway and deer walking by my window all the time, and I go out in the aspen trees and listen to the rustle. And I actually And exercise is another thing that really helps out. If you are physically fit, you're going to be more able to deal with things personally and psychologically.
Well, I want to, before we even get into the solving it, right? I want to really hang on to this area right here, because it's an anchoring in of the challenge that we have is that we have perceptions of the world, and then those perceptions bleed out into the world. But those perceptions, we think that our perceptions are accurate, but our perceptions are things that are happening that are symptoms of what's happening below the scenes, right? So you think you're a cop, right? You think I've got to pursue adrenaline. That's who I am. I'm this guy that just loves to go, go, go. But underneath that, there's something else going on that's below the perception, right?
Yes.
Automated.
Yes.
And so you think you're that, and then you're acting in your world, and it's creating outcomes that are not ideal, but you're like, what the hell's going on? I feel like I'm together. I feel like I got my wits about me, but you keep bleeding into the world all this stuff that's harmful.
Exactly. And I mean, we're great as cops. We're great at fixing everybody else's problems, but try to fix our own. Most of us couldn't even admit we had them, and then the things that we did for other people, we didn't do for ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I've discovered is if we're not okay, we can't help anybody else. And that,
but you have to put on the mask, right?
I'm sorry.
You have to put on the mask of being okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and back then, if you said, "Oh, I want to go to therapy," they'd fire you, unfit for duty.
Yeah.
It was, and even today that happens.
Holy crap.
Yeah. It's getting better and things are shifting. But, one of the things I went through up at the cabin was I would come home from work. I'd get up at 3:30 in the morning to be to work at 6.
Yeah.
And I would get to work. I'd come home, get off work at 4 if I didn't have overtime, and I'd get home at 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, and I just crashed. And I mean, it was a TV dinner or whatever was easy, a sandwich, and just crash. And then I started drinking. And, I was a good cop, because the standard answer on a DUI is how many drinks do you have tonight? 2. Well, I only had 2 drinks a night, but they were 34 ounces each.
Yeah.
And so, I was feeling no pain, and I was having nightmares and things like that. And that kind of soothed that temporarily. But in reality, it just led to more problems.
Yeah.
And, I finally have, I tamed that beast. And as I've done things and opened up, I've been able to get rid of the nightmares. In fact, one of the biggest things that helped me out was writing my book. I talk, therapists call it journaling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my book was my form of journaling.
I get that.
I wrote everything by hand. I've got piles of notebooks, and the first draft was all handwritten. And that tactile sense and things, it just draws everything out. And I discovered something that's kind of cool. The mind, well, don't let the mind run your life. It's there to help organize it and be the computer to get you through things. But when you let the mind run things, it just screws things up, because the whole idea on the mind is to protect you.
Yeah.
And that's why it tells you, oh, well, that won't work, or that's not good enough. It doesn't want that rejection. And so as I started figuring that out, that I can use it to operate things like a computer, but I can't let it make all the decisions that negatively affect me. And in fact, when I had my book published, the publisher wanted the entire manuscript. And I had it done, finished it in November. And then I went, all I had was submission paperwork, and it was about 8 to 10 pages. I had it all done except the endorsements. They wanted 3 to 5 endorsements. I had 2. So what did my mind tell me? That's not good enough. Yeah. And then I got a 3rd endorsement, and it says, but who are these people? Nobody knows them. And it gave me excuses, and I delayed submitting it for 6 months because of that one page. And finally, I learned a trick. It's called the countdown. And it takes your mind about 5 seconds to come up with an objection. And so I got up one morning, and I only had 20 minutes worth of work to do to finish it. I got up and said, I'm going to finish this today. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. And I went down, jumped on my laptop, spent the 20 minutes of the laptop, attached the manuscript, attached the other one, hit send, and it was gone. And that was on a Thursday. On Friday, I got a call and it says, I'd love to meet with you on a Zoom meeting next week from the publisher. And we set a day on Wednesday because I had work Monday, Tuesday.
Yeah.
And on Wednesday, he says, okay, they meet on Thursdays to accept or decline books. I'm going to send you a sample contract in case they agree to yours. And I went through the whole process. So on Friday, I'm out in my garage and I didn't have my phone with me. I left, I was doing some work. And I went back in and I had a message on my phone and it says, congratulations, they accepted your book. I'm sending you a real contract.
Wow.
Instead of a sample. And I delayed it by months because of that internal fear that my mind created.
Yeah.
So that's another thing huge is use your mind for what it is, but don't let it run things because it's just going to hold you back.
These are tools, like the when we use our 12 journeys framework, we dive into the non-conscious, all your automations, right? All the things that you think you are. And then we go into awareness where you wake up to that. And most of us judge ourselves in such a way that we spin ourselves back into our automation. So we numb out or we spin back, right? And then the emotions, a lot of people don't want to feel their emotions, so they numb those out.
Yes.
And so we teach how to express those. And then you move into acceptance and acknowledgement. And then you have these tools like empowerment and gratitude that help you elevate. And so when you have these tools and you're using them alongside like what you're talking about here, you're having the difficult emotions, you're having the difficult thoughts, and you lean on these tools, no matter what your brain is telling you, these tools help override that. So when you do that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, it's like your brain might say, hey, but we shouldn't send it in because, and it has all the justifications. And then that puts you in your automations and you're another 6 months out.
Yeah.
So sometimes these tools are what you need to lean on when you can't think straight.
Yep.
Right?
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, there's some of them just real tiny and little, and I think you hit the key thing there is though being aware.
Yeah. There's nothing to do, right? If you don't know.
Yeah. And a lot of these things are started when we're kids and they're just are bred into us and we're taught from an early age and we just take them for granted and think that's us and it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. It's programmed, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's hit on this for a minute while we're here. Okay. Yeah. So from 0 to 7, we're sponges. Like 1 million synaptic connections a minute, trillions, quadrillions of synaptic connections right at the end of the neuron. But we're talking millions of neural connections. But from 0 to 7, we don't really kick anything out. No. And our brain goes to almost 95% of adult size by the age of 5. And so all that programming from 0 to 7, whatever our culture teaches us, our society, our family, is pretty well anchored in.
Yep.
But it doesn't mean it's permanent. It's just it's pretty well anchored in. And then from 5 to 25, we go back to about 50% of that original size is what we end up with. And then that carries us for the rest of our life. And so you think about the development of the brain and how during the beginning, it's just this flood of like absorbing everything you can absorb, and whatever's going on in your environment, you think that's the way the world works. And so it becomes this core that you build on.
Yep.
And man, to really have time to think with it, the challenge of thinking is that you have time to think. And when you have time to think, you have time to feel the emotions of that thinking. And most of that thinking is pretty negative. And so it's not very fun, right?
It's absolutely, that's what I'm huge on being positive because that's the only way you grow. That's the only way I grow. You know, I can't speak for everybody else, but it just changes the way life looks and the way life I feel. But again, our perception is our reality.
It is. Yeah. And so, you know, speaking to what you're speaking here, the officers and military and people that are out there, you know, experiencing things that we're not equipped to handle.
Yeah.
Go. Well, let me finish this out and then we'll jump into that. So you're out there experiencing things that you're not equipped to handle, and you have this old programming that wasn't that you're using to handle a difficult situation, and it's not programmed to handle it, and so they don't know what to do. It's not okay to go get therapy because you'll get fired. You'll lose confidence with your team if you show weakness, right? You have to be very stoic. You
I'm
have
a
to
guy. I
pretend,
got this.
yeah, I've got this. I'm not weak.
Yeah.
And then you're suffering on the inside. So to handle that suffering, you numb out with alcohol, drugs, sex, adrenaline, whatever it is. And you stay in that cycle and it feels depressing. You lose hope and then you check out, right?
And that's one reason the suicide rate in the military and law enforcement is extremely high.
Yeah. Speak to that. Keep going.
It's those they're starting to be more aware now, but
Mm.
the suicide rate is in law enforcement. Well, I think in the military they say 22 a day or
Holy
something
cow.
like that. And I know there's a Project 22 based on that, and that may be old stats.
Right.
But 22 a day in law enforcement, there's more officers die by suicide than are killed in the line of duty.
Holy
Probably
cow.
double. And yeah, we see things that we aren't designed to see. We see things that the normal person doesn't even want to admit is there.
Right.
And that it's because I kind of termed it, we deal with good people having a bad day or bad people. And that's the life every day of an officer. And we want to be kind. We want to help our communities. And that's the purpose of most officers. There are a few exceptions here and there, but most officers, that's what we want to do. And as we see these things, it eats away at your soul and erodes the way you look at things. And again, we mentioned perception is reality. Well, that's not true. It's our perception is our reality.
Yeah.
And officers and the military, my son was injured in Afghanistan, and I had a daughter that spent a year in Iraq. And so the military is very near and dear to my heart. But we see things that erode us slowly and slowly and slowly, but it's ever progressive. You can't stop it. Well, you can, but you've got to start using some techniques that I had no knowledge of at the time.
Right.
And so that's where the fixing, and I don't like the term fixing, but to help regrow is what we get to do. And that's my journey in life now. And that's the other thing I tell people: when you retire, have a purpose. And my purpose is, if I can keep one officer from not doing the same stupid stuff that I did, then we all win. If I keep one officer that does not want a divorce from getting divorced and give him the tools, then we all win. Because think about this: the most important relationship in our life is our families.
Yeah.
And what happens at home, it happens at work affects home. That's hence the documentary. Is there something going on at home? And watch that. I'll tell you what, I cry every time I watch it. But if that affects us, the work affects home, and what happens at home affects work. And I know that through experience, because when I was having a bad day at home, I was having a bad day at work. And if I'm having a bad day at work, so are the people I'm dealing with.
Right.
So I suddenly realized that if I fix myself and I fix my relationship at home, and that's all good and going great, that ripples out to work, that ripples out to our communities, and we change the world with that. But we change the world one person at a time.
And it starts here.
Ourselves. Yep.
Beautiful. So what you're giving and laying the foundation of here is a framework, and we call it the 12 journeys, but it's a framework of resilience.
Yeah.
And the first part is recognizing that we all have some version of that automation that goes on, and it comes from a lot of areas, and it could be from your experiences, like what you're saying in law enforcement and military, where that starts to become your perception of the world, and you start to experience that in the world because of that perception. It becomes your reality. Now, what we know is that is just the perception of the reality, and that's what's bleeding out of you, right? So when we go into our growth journeys, because the root journeys are all about that, and what you've talked about here, the growth journeys are where you start to change that and shift it.
Yeah.
And what can happen though is that when you step into the growth journeys and you start visioning something different for yourself, then that becomes an ideal. And so anytime you don't measure up to that new ideal, then you start to judge yourself, and you spin back into your roots, and you go back into your automations, and then you find yourself in the old cycles.
Yes.
So there's this balancing of stretching into the new you while being very gentle with yourself about not being anything like the new you. Right. because we're so hard on ourselves
We
around
are.
stuff. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, and again, those are things that are taught when we're so young. I can't be critical of somebody else, but I am very self-critical of me.
Yeah.
And we call that my father was a coach. So we'll start with that. One day I was 12 years old and I was not a very good hitter, but I was a good catcher. And I had the game of my life. I went, caught up on the screen, cleats on the backstop, caught a foul tip. Nobody stole second base on me that day. I actually hit 3 for 5 that day. I had a heck of a day. And the only thing was, my throws to second base were not very good that day. That's actually they did steal base, and that was another game that they didn't. But there all the other stuff and everything went good. I hit great, played good, stopped every ball that came to me that was going in the dirt, and I couldn't throw anybody out at second base. So the next day, my dad took me out to the ballpark, and he says, "Your throws to second base weren't very good. We're going to work on that." And he put a 5-gallon bucket with the opening on second base, so the opening facing home. He dumped a bucket of balls on the mound and he pitched them to me, and I had to throw them into that bucket. 90 degrees, middle of June. And it was hot. And if the ball missed the bucket, it went out to the 400-foot fence, and who had to go run and go pick them all up carrying that 5-gallon bucket. And then we'd do it again. And he wanted me to improve by concentrating on what I had done poorly. So that's the way I was taught. And so I'm very self-critical, too much to an extreme sometimes. But a lot of times I kind of just let it roll off.
Yeah.
And now I get to look at myself, not critically, but self-accountably.
Yeah. Big difference.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I still screw up, but I look at it and go, okay, this might have worked better. And I don't spend time on the past too much because it's a waste of time.
Yeah.
How many times do we replay conversations in our head? I should have said this, should have said that. I do that. I used to do that all the time, and I'd let it eat me alive. And now I go, okay, I screwed that one up. Let me see what I can do different. And I'd evaluate it, then I'd move on.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I do now. And I'm able to maintain a good positive outlook. I don't watch the news because all they do is concentrate. What's the old Don Henley song, Dirty Laundry?
Yeah.
And all they concentrate on is bad news. Because bad news sells, and it's garbage. I wish we had a news channel that just concentrated on all the good things that happen every day, because there's plenty out there that's good that's happening.
There are. They just don't take traction. It's not as sticky. But so you focus on the good, and you have self-accountability for what's going on. And if we really look at this journey of overcoming adversity in our lives and creating resilience, and grit and persistence and all these things, life is challenging. Let's be honest here. Life can be really challenging. It can also be very beautiful. And the times that it gets really beautiful is when we are so kind of easy on ourselves. We're kind of accepting and acknowledging of ourselves. Yeah. And we speak that, our humanness. What do you hear in that?
Yeah, just go with it. I just kind of go with it. And that doesn't mean, every way the wind blows you're going, but just kind of go with the flow.
Yeah.
And as you get into that good flow, it just simply grows, and pretty soon it gets bigger and bigger. It's, I travel and I speak, and I get frustrated because I don't speak enough. But I like to be busy all the time. Just recently, what's the old saying? If one door shuts, another opens.
Yep.
And, I supported a group for 4 years, and I got onto their conference, and I got asked not to come back. And I still don't know exactly why.
Yeah.
But I let that hurt me for about 2 or 3 days. I'm like, what the, and beat myself up. Well, all of a sudden, within the next 3 weeks, I've had 3 people call me and ask me to co-write books with them. One's on leadership. One's on how wolves get into our ranks and ways to keep them out so that they aren't creating the issues. And the other one is on trauma for sexual abuse victims, and how the trauma in officers affects those investigations. Yeah. And all of a sudden I'm looking at that, and then I just got asked to speak at a conference next year, all 3 days.
Yeah.
And they're doing stuff. So all of a sudden I'm kind of going, wow, all right. that part of that journey's over. And thank you for shutting that door.
Yeah.
And gratitude, I think, is huge in the way we look at things too.
Man, a huge piece, right?
Yeah, because I could be angry, and I let my ego get in the way, and I was pissed for a day or two. But then I suddenly went, well, hold it. You know what? That's okay. And I let it go. And once I let it go, all this other stuff started coming in.
Yeah.
And that just kind of blows me away.
Okay.
So next year's already starting to look good.
I like this. I want to hang here. It's I was talking to my girlfriend this morning about how, we have friends that they're single, they're in the singles world, and they're like pushing for a relationship. And then the more they push it away, and it doesn't come. And we met in the not looking, and it flowed together. And often in life, with whatever you're creating, the more we push toward it, the more it runs away from us. It's like the more we can let it come to us and let it flow the way it needs to flow, the better it goes. Our forced creations often look really messy. If you let a garden grow naturally, it does pretty good.
Yep.
And I see some of these, like the gardens, the square watermelons where they put them in the squares. They're not as sweet. They're cool because they're boxed in or they got a face on them. But that forcing of the watermelon took away the sweetness of that watermelon.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to steal that analogy, by the way.
Well, good, man. It's yours.
Out there yelling at my garden, like, grow the way I want you to grow.
Right. Right. It's hard because you do want it to go a certain way. So it's balancing that aggressiveness and the passivity. Like, you can't do nothing, but you don't have to do everything.
Yeah. And that's the key. I got lucky and I got another chance, and I have a wonderful relationship now with a great lady, she spoils me rotten, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
And I love it. But we kind of fell in the habit of just going with whatever.
Yeah.
And our life became chaotic. And so we've kind of addressed issues and taken control. Like I said, we had a whole bunch of different places. I had a place in Florida and I had the cabin and things like this. And we finally got rid of all the extra and just settled to one place and have settled our life down the way we want. Now it's peaceful instead of going whichever way the wind blows. So you're right. We get to take a little bit of control, but we can't force things.
Yeah.
And the way I met her was totally unforced.
Yeah.
It was, I did the dating app thing. Yeah. And I went out with 9 ladies in 10 days, and I was exhausted and broke.
Right.
And they were all great, nice ladies.
Yeah.
But there was just something not there in each one of them. And I actually made a list of 10 things that I wanted. And I'd been married twice. I kind of knew what I wanted. And so we talked. I talked with her on the phone, and we talked on the phone for 2 or 3 weeks before we ever met. But one night she says, "Don't you have to go to work tomorrow?" I says, "Yeah." "Don't you have to get up at 3:30 to go to work?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Don't you think you should get some sleep?" And I looked at the clock, and it was 1 o'clock, and we've been talking since 8.
Oh man.
Yeah. And we just built that natural thing, and it just flowed from there. It was
beautiful.
In fact, I didn't even really ask her to marry me. One day she said something, and I said, "That's why I'm going to marry you."
Yeah.
and she kind of looked at me and said, "What?" And I went, "Oh," it just came out.
Yeah. It's such an example of how life should go, right?
Yeah.
Steve Hardison's on here, and he talks about what's called the tow truck driver distinction. And I drove out to try and get into Pixar Studios years ago, and he calls up and he's like, "I'm going to create a miracle." And on the way home, he's like, "Hey man, you wouldn't believe what just happened. It's pretty amazing." And I go, "What?" And he goes, "I got a flat tire in the middle of nowhere." And he's in a Porsche, so you can't tow it behind a vehicle or roll it into town. It's got to go on a certain truck, and he's hundreds of miles away from home. But he turned it into the absolute best experience because his determination was that this is an opportunity to create, right?
Yeah.
Rather than react. And so you know, when you're in that flow, it's really up to us to see how we're gonna flow with it. We don't have to force it. It doesn't have to have a certain outcome. Everything's a possibility. So it's really up to us how we want to play the game, right?
Absolutely. And you know, you said the certain outcome, because often our expectations create
Yeah.
the outcome, but they limit us.
They do,
We don't
right?
even realize we're limiting ourselves
Yeah.
because our potential is so beyond what we can imagine. It's amazing.
And then we're disappointed when we get exactly what we wanted,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? You're like, shit, I thought it'd be more.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
it's like, you know, I wrote my book, and
yeah,
I never dreamed of writing a book,
yeah,
and I never dreamed of being in a documentary. And say one of the books we're co-writing has already been talked about putting in a documentary.
yeah.
And so all these things are starting to evolve. And in fact, I've got a gentleman working on my book as a script for a movie.
Mm,
And so we're working on that together. And I'm looking at these things, and my world went from here. I'm a cop.
yeah,
And that's how I identified myself. I'm a cop. To now I'm out here and still growing. I'm writing 2 more books on my own.
yeah,
I'm on page 305 of about a 350 page, and that'll be first of a 5-book series on fiction, of course,
yeah.
which is, man, that's fun. And so I'm just kind of enjoying stuff now. And
You know what?
never dreamed of.
That reminds me of, like, if a tree were to say, I am bark, like there's a certain facet of a tree called bark, right?
Yep.
But it has that one thing, and it's called bark on it. It says, I am bark, because it has this one thing on it, right? But the tree we know is a tree, and it's much bigger than that bark.
Like,
You know,
I'm a
bark
cop,
is a part of it.
right?
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
bark.
a cop. I am bark.
Yeah.
Like, being a cop was just a part of your creation here, and it's a facet of it, but it's not who you are. Like, if we really get back to this, who you are at your core, it's beyond all of this, and it just keeps expressing when you allow it. But when we restrict it, then we end up suffering, because we're not living up to our own ideals, and then we feel depressed, and we're not living to the ideals we think others have, so we feel anxious.
Yeah.
And then we're just stuck in anxiety and depression all the time, because we're just not measuring up, right?
But what aren't we measuring up to?
It made up shit, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's all made up. So here's where I'd want to know is, you know, as you're making it up, you talked about legacy earlier. You're like, if I can make an impact in one officer's life,
Yeah.
then it's worth it all. I'll get out of bed. I'll do this every day. If I can make the impact in one life, and Ryan, you can speak to this too, then that's my purpose.
Yeah.
How important is that?
We are purpose-driven beings.
Yeah.
And if we don't have a purpose, we flounder. That's why I know in law enforcement, a lot of guys retire, have nothing to look forward to, or, you know, I'm going to go fishing. That's the standard. I'm going to go fishing, or I'm going to go golf. Well, yeah, you're going to do that for a few months. You're going to be bored out of your skull because you're used to more than that. And, you know, and besides, I do both of those. Plus I do all this other stuff. So why not do it that way?
Right. Right.
And, you know, it's, as we go forward without a purpose, we flounder.
Yeah.
And so what I've seen is guys retire and they have nothing to do. They don't live long.
Yeah. True.
And I was told I would be lucky to live to be 40. My family was told that when I was 15. And that was the life expectancy back then. I have type 1 diabetes, and the 25 years was the life expectancy back then.
Wow.
Thank God for technology, because I'm going to live to be 95 just to piss them off and prove them wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I have that purpose, and now I have where I'm writing and stuff. I get up every day and I write at least an hour a day.
Yeah.
And as I work through things, you know, the creativity flows, and man, I love being creative. I wasn't creative back in the day.
Yeah.
You know, I can't paint. Well, I can paint a house maybe.
Yeah.
But you know, now all of a sudden I've got things, and I'll read it to my wife, and my wife is not a book person, but I'll read her what I wrote, and she'll go, and she gets all excited. And as I'm reading it, I get excited, and that's what I want readers to do. And I'm going, yeah, this is going to be so freaking good.
Yeah.
And you know, that's the enjoyment for me and for others when they use the byproduct.
Yeah. I can hear this, I always anchor it back to what we do. And it's just a way to put language to it. That's all it is a framework that people can see in their lives is, the root journeys, the shoot and the fruit, right? That's what we say.
Yep.
The root, because you've got all this inner work that you get to do, and the shoot, because you've got this growth that you get to do. And then the fruit is the legacy, the purpose, why you're doing it, right? The sweet, excitement and joy of enjoying the outcome.
Yeah.
And not in yourself, in what it does for others, right? That's the fruit. I think it was Andrew Huberman said that we feel gratitude. The chemical release of gratitude comes from others expressing gratitude from what we've done for them and us witnessing that, not from us giving. It's from us seeing them excited about what we were able to give. That's where the chemical response comes, right?
Perfect. Yeah. I have not heard that, but I love it.
Isn't that cool? Yeah. I mean, that neuroscience is just a phenomenal field, because you start to see, okay, we talk about these as a philosophies, but then they go back it up and you're like, oh, that's incredible, right? Science and philosophy working together.
And when you use them together,
yeah,
that's where everything blossoms even more. I mean, it's almost like a growth starter.
Yeah. And you get excited to do more.
Yeah. Yeah.
But legacy, the importance of legacy is, like, I would imagine you still have down days. I would imagine you still don't measure up to your ideals. I would imagine you're not where you think you should be. I would imagine there's more in you, and you strive for it. And when you don't get it, you get frustrated. you just laugh.
Yeah. I went through that a couple of weeks ago, and 3 or 4 days where I had set some objectives, things I wanted to do, and I didn't get anything done.
Yeah.
And I was like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Let it go. And then, I actually had a writer's block for about 4 months. It was like, boom.
Yeah.
But then once I worked way through, and, I worked through there by using some of the tools and things that I had to do that worked for me.
Yeah.
That I went out and, I went fly fishing and get out in nature. That's a huge for me. And I just love the calm and the peace. I never catch anything, but I don't care. Yeah. But I just enjoy the rhythm and the river and things like that. And I started doing that. And then I started doing, I do martial arts, and I have for many, many years. And so I started doing some martial arts and working through some things there and getting the physical activity. And then all of a sudden one day, the dam broke, and that 4 weeks I didn't get anything done on my book. I made up for that in about 2 weeks.
Yeah. Incredible.
Yeah. And it just suddenly it came. And now that I'm in the flow again, like when I was waiting, I started typing in a few things on what I wrote yesterday. I went, that needs to be adjusted a little bit. Yeah. And, so that's what life, just like I said, get with the flow and don't dam it up, because we're the ones damming it up.
Man, you're speaking, without the downs, there would be no need for resilience.
Yeah. Well,
there would be no need to bounce back.
Yeah. It's like, if you don't know what light is, you don't know what dark is.
Yeah.
So if you don't know what down is, you don't know what the ups are. And
there's nothing to strive for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. If your life is good all the time, and I don't know anybody yet, but maybe it's just their perception of it. But man, I wake up some mornings, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. The way that I've tried to build our community here, I get so frustrated with where I think it should be, because I have high expectations for myself. I have high ideals, and sometimes I measure myself against those, and I find myself wanting.
Yeah.
And I'm really hard on myself over it. And then I have to go through what I teach others to do, is like, okay, buddy, hold up. It's okay. Right. It's okay.
I have the same thing. Like I want to speak every month, somewhere every month. And I usually get 2 or 3 months in a row, and then I'll have 3 months where I got nothing.
Yeah.
And I, during those 3 months, and I'm just,
right.
What are you doing? And, berating myself. And, I have a couple of agents that get me booked and stuff, but I get to work more on my own too, because it's just not enough.
Right.
And it's got nothing to do with money, pay, or anything like that. I mean, I'm retired. I'm okay.
Yeah.
It's just got that I want to get that message out there, and I feel
Yeah.
it's so important. And I would just want to get in front of more and more people. And because the more who learn and the more who know, then the better my world becomes and the better their world becomes.
Well, it's like planting a garden and you go out the next day and you're like, where the hell's the fruit? What the hell?
Yeah.
What is this? Right?
Yeah. Well, I worked really hard for 4 years, got everything going. I
Yeah.
taught twice in November, once in December, 4 times in January, and then COVID hit
Mm.
and wiped me out. I had like 17 presentations in 7 states canceled, and
Wow.
I've never come back from that yet. But now it's almost 4 years later, and things are starting to go again. So there's a little bit of time frame. And
Yeah.
for a long time, I just didn't feel I could put that much energy in because I spent hours every day on the phone
Yeah.
marketing myself and talking to people and pitching my program and pitching the lessons to learn and what the benefits are to them and their department.
Yeah.
And yet then just a couple months ago, I spoke at a hospital in Colorado, and I
Yeah.
suddenly found a whole new market because nurses, and doctors, especially after COVID, the trauma that they have is just very similar to what officers have.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we take our traumatic patient into the hospital and dump them off on them.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's just so many. Again, another one of those. Well, let's adjust a little bit. The opportunity arose, and here we are.
Yeah. I just hear as a framework though, is it's a consistent resilience
Yeah.
to our intentions. Our intentions are to stretch and grow and create something positive in the world. And by the nature of stretching, we are creating a positive ripple in the world. It's our purpose. And there will be times where you've just got to recalibrate and re-engage and recalibrate and re-engage. And it's consistent. And, to hear people say I should be further along than I am right now is their own standard that they're putting on themselves to stretch. Right.
Yeah.
So where we really suffer isn't in the doing, it's in our judgments of the doing.
Yes. That's what they get. Yeah. Judgment-free zone, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what we strive on that with other people. Why don't we do that with ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we are so much harder on ourselves. And again, I know for me, that was the way I was brought up.
Yeah.
Always looking for the negative. And because if I can fix the negative, then it becomes positive and I'm better.
Yeah. And I can see this tying in.
That's a fallacy, actually.
Is that thinking?
Yeah. I mean, you want to overcome the negative, but if you concentrate all on the negative, that's all you're going to see.
Yeah, and you create that, right?
And yes, and what you see is what you create. Yes.
Yeah. So I could see, the title of the show, and maybe it's a misnomer. Maybe we clickbaited everybody here, on relationships, but I don't think we did, because I think I think it was T. Harv Eker that said, "How you do anything is how you do everything."
Yeah.
One of my mentors shared that with me. And you really look at it, and it's you are the common denominator, like you hit on earlier, in everything you touch, including relationships. And so if you've got PTSD in your own life, that would affect everything you touch because you're involved in it, right?
If you let it, yes.
If you let it. Yeah, beautiful. Yes. Beautiful catch. Yeah.
And for the first part of my life, it affected everything, and not in a good way. But I had no clue back then.
Right.
I didn't even realize, I didn't put together that many of the behaviors I was displaying were PTSD related till years later. In fact, 2 years ago, somebody said something, and now I'm going blank on it today, of course. But I had no clue that was PTSD related. It was a psychologist up talking. And I suddenly realized there was a behavior that I had done very commonly over the years. And I suddenly realized he brought that specific behavior up. And again, I'm old. I go blank sometimes. But I suddenly woken me up to that. And so since then, I haven't been doing that behavior.
Yeah. So Maya Angelou, I had to pull this up because I couldn't remember her name. So you're not the only one that, draws blanks here. But she says that you do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better.
Perfect.
Right.
Yes. That is so great saying.
Yeah. I mean, that's really what we're talking about here is you did the best you could with what you had. So, you know, you talked earlier about how hard we are on ourselves over what we did, the past. We revisit the past. No, I should have said this. Well, you did the best you could with what you had.
Yeah.
And now that you know better, do better. And you know, my favorite definition of forgiveness is to not cause additional harm. And we're not talking about other people here.
Yeah.
It's right. Stop causing yourself additional harm over what you didn't do. You did the best you could with what you had.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like running lights and siren as a police officer. If
Hmm.
you're running code, that means it's an extremely important call
Yeah.
or dangerous or whatever.
Yeah.
If you're halfway there and you're going through an intersection and you get in an accident, what have you done?
It's more issues.
Yeah, you've got another serious scene and
Yep.
you're not getting to where you need to be to help.
Right.
So the moral story is take care of yourself.
Hmm.
As you take care of yourself on that journey, you get there, then you were able to be of use to somebody else. Because if you don't get there, you're of use to no one.
That's big. That's big. So when it comes to PTSD, you know, the big thing with PTSD is it's stored throughout the whole body. You know, trauma is stored through the entire body.
Yep.
And they're finding that out now because of research. And you know, Edith Eger, who's a concentration camp survivor, says that expression is the opposite of depression. You know, when you can express things and you can heal them.
Yes.
And PTSD is one of those things that when you can start to express it and get it out of the body, wherever it's stored, then it starts to heal naturally, right?
Over time, yes.
Over time.
Yeah. I use that actually in my class because it's interesting. We'll talk about trauma and
Yep.
I ask them to write it down. Write it down. You don't have to share with anybody if you don't want to, but write it down. And the reason we write it down is that lets the mind through the tactile senses and
Yeah.
the thought processes lets the mind know it's okay to let it out.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And then once you get that to that point, it becomes easier then to share verbally.
Yeah.
And as we share things verbally, that's the big message I have is talk to somebody. Talk to somebody about the trauma.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, it will eat you alive. It will turn into the nightmares. You know, I was having 3 to 5 nightmares a month.
Yeah.
And now I have maybe 2 or 3 a year.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, something triggers. And like I was at the airport in Denver, and this gal just, you know, I have a service dog actually.
Yeah.
And I'm going through the airport with my dog, and he's misbehaving. So I submitted him, put him down and on the floor and was holding him down to get him to calm down and get him to settle and do his thing. And this gal came up behind me and I swung my arm around. She started yelling and screaming at me. I thought I was being attacked.
Hmm.
And she just kept going on and on and on and until there's like 30 people around me. And my vision went like this.
Oof.
And tunnel and into a tunnel, everything turned gray. I've been to the Denver airport, I don't know how many times. I
Yeah.
know where the dog room is. This is where I was on my way to.
Yeah.
I got lost. And I got lost for almost an hour.
Holy cow.
And I'm guessing on the time because when I got down to where the baggage claim was, the only one there was my wife. And everybody else was gone. So it
Wow.
a while. And it was not a good night. And then I had nightmares 4 nights in a row after that. Created by this lady. You know, and she was just out of her gourd, and I'd still shake my head. Well, but what can I do? And number one, I filed a complaint with her employer.
Yeah.
And number two, then I had to worry about taking care of myself. And luckily, I was going up into the mountains, and so I went up, had a day up in the mountains by myself, and just enjoyed. Got walked around, fresh air, sunshine, things like that. I started using some of the other things that I know. So I got exercise, I got nature.
Yeah.
And then there's a whole bunch of holistic ways that I really love to deal with through things. I'm going to go off that topic for a minute.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of Tibetan bowls or singing bowls?
Uh-huh.
I love those things.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a gal that does those for me, and I just go into a trance. And it's amazing. And then you have all of the there's all kinds of other things that you can do now. They're coming out with ketamine. I won't use it. I don't do drugs.
Yeah,
never will.
Yep. It was incredible.
Okay. You've done it?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yep. Done many treatments of it. and it was mind opening, and what it did for me, and this is a personal journey for each person,
Yeah.
but it showed me that I can let go, and that I will always come back to me, no matter how intense the experience was.
There you go.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
That works great. Well, and then you have EMDR,
Yep.
which is the eye movement desensitization. I can't remember what the R stands for.
It's
And
reprogramming. Yep.
Reprogramming. Thank you. Yeah. And that works well. I mean, there's
ART therapy.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so those are all things to work through. And my son and I had this discussion. My son was in Afghanistan. He was blown up 20 years old by an IED. And he was in 3 firefights a day. He was almost hit by rockets twice, was finally blown up with an IED. And I mean, horrible experience. He spent 4 years at Walter Reed, had 40 plus surgeries so he could sort of walk again. He was 20.
Holy crap.
Yeah. Then you have me, who's, I've had the children that I've not been able to bring back. I've had the, shots taken at me. I've had all kinds of things that have happened to me on the job that were traumatic. And then you have the housewife up the street who's 45 years old, has had her dog for 15 years and watches him run out in front of a car and get killed.
Right.
Okay. Whose trauma is worse?
It's so relative, right?
The end result's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah, the end result's the same. The instigating events are much more dramatic on his part and on mine than on hers, but the end result is the same. So that's when I suddenly realized that as we had this discussion, thank goodness for a smart kid.
Yep.
And we had this discussion. We went, okay, so I need to start looking at how can I help others besides just those in law enforcement. Of course, my focus is law enforcement because that's where I came from.
Right.
And I see the need that, we talk about all the things going on in our communities, and all we hear is the negative stuff. And most of those are based on false claims. A lot of them are, I won't say most, but so how do we repair those relationships? And that's when I came to the conclusion we repair those relationships by taking care of our own first,
right?
And let that ripple out until all of the communications and all of the things in the community are better. And then you have better relationships, and that just grows. Then opportunities like this, I had no clue what to expect getting on here.
Yeah.
And that's on my part for not doing my research, but
you're good. I love it.
But I get to talk about these things that are so near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
Because I saw something come up, the journey, and it's the journey, and we want to successfully complete that journey. And when we get to the end, I'm going to look back and go, okay, I did everything I could. I gave it all.
Yeah.
I grew up, I was taught never quit. That's the only reason I survived and succeeded in a lot of things, because I was always the little guy.
Yeah. And
yet, small story. We played football in high school, Al Bundy, right? And they brought in a new linebacker coach played for the Steelers. The guy was huge. Freaking huge. And I was 6 foot and 134 pounds. I'm playing linebacker, and he says, well, you're too small for linebacker. You give up 2 yards every time you're hit. And I looked at him, I said, yeah, but I hit them 2 yards earlier than anybody else. And he says, so they took me out of the linebacking core. So what position did I play after that? Center on the offensive line.
Wow.
Taking on the 260 pounders. I was the only one that could snap the ball back to the punter, and I was fast enough. I could knock anybody over, but I'd trip them up. I'd get in their way and screen them. And so, it's not, I was too small. Well, I was too small in his expectation.
Right.
But in my own, I went, you know what? I'll show you.
Yeah.
And I did.
That's amazing.
And so that's kind of, I think we all have that push in us.
Yeah.
I'll prove you wrong.
Yeah.
I'm not too small.
Well, as we wrap up here, we're at the end of the show here. Is there a final message for the people across the screen from you that you'd want them to know?
Yeah. Please if something is bothering you, talk about it. Get it out there, whether it be a loved one, a friend, a coworker, anybody. If you've got something, because if we bottle things up, even if it's not trauma related, there's an issue. We bottle it up, it eats us up, and it grows.
Yeah.
So don't let it grow. Get it out there and deal with it. The best thing that I have is open, honest communication. My wife and I have no secrets whatsoever.
Yeah.
And she says, sometimes she says, I'm too open. And I ask her, well, I can change that. She goes, no, please don't.
Yeah.
Because I'd rather have it out there all on the table. And if you're not doing anything to be, quote unquote, your expectation ashamed of, then why not put it out there?
Yeah. That's beautiful. Ryan, final thoughts?
You talked about purpose and finding it's sometimes people think that they have to search for one thing that's going to be their purpose, why they were made for Earth. And the more and more I talk to people, and the more and more I live life, purpose to me is anything that's a worthy ideal or goal that you put your energy towards. There's millions and millions, maybe billions of worthwhile purposes that are out there. So find something that lights you up. Find something that gets you excited, that gets you passionate, that makes you feel good, and that can be your purpose. Until you find something else that you want to do. I think that like you found a purpose here because you've gone through a bunch of things in your world, and you don't want others to have to suffer like you suffered,
Yeah.
and to hopefully to shortcut it or to help them become aware so that they don't have to go through such horrible things or the difficulty as much, be able to change and adapt their lives, become aware of what they're doing so that they can be empowered to shift. You've got a bunch of these amazing tools and techniques, and for those of you that are at home that hear this and are starting to become aware, get a hold of Glenn. Have a conversation with him. You can go to his website. You can start to be where he is. Find him, because you're the purpose just by being there. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that, Hugh. And you talked about helping just one person, and that's how we started with the Giants. Is that we were bound and determined to that even if we just helped one person, that it was all worth it. We do it again, and that statement's still true. And a lot of the times we lean back on ourselves. Like I look at where I was when I met Nick, and I talked about meeting him at the beginning of the show, to the person that I am today. And I'm the same Ryan. I'm Ryan still, but my mindset, my goals, the way that I am has shifted radically. And I've gone through ups and downs in that whole process in the last almost 5 years. But my life is better. And so for me, it's the person that I helped the most was myself. And I get to be on here every week with amazing giants like you that are making a difference in the world and helping others that have gone through some pretty rough stuff. So keep going, brother, because you are making a difference in the world, and we love and appreciate you for doing so.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for those that are watching, we appreciate you. Thanks for being a part of this. As we always say, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. You're right on time. Keep stepping, keep getting out of bed, keep going. You got this. We love you. We appreciate you. You probably know somebody that could benefit from this episode specifically. Share it with them, send it to them. And as always, man, we love you. We will see you in the next episode. Go make it a giant day.
Love you too.